My name is Paige Thornton. I'm 29 years old, and I work as an accountant at a mid-sized logistics company outside Chicago. 3 days before my brother's graduation party, my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I know you paid off the $680,000 mortgage, but we're giving this house to Dylan as a graduation gift." Then he added, "And you're not invited to the party." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just turned to my Uncle Marcus, the only person in that room who knew what my parents didn't, and asked, "Do you want to tell them, or should I?" Before I tell you what happened 3 days later at Dylan's graduation party, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to where this all began, 5 years ago, when I made a decision that changed everything. The Thornton family home sits on a quiet street in the suburbs of Chicago, a classic colonial-style house with 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and 2 oak trees in the front yard that my grandfather planted 50 years ago. My father, Robert Thornton, retired early from his insurance job and treats that house like his crown jewel. My mother, Linda, is a homemaker who spent her whole life making sure everything looks perfect for the neighbors. And my brother Dylan? He just graduated with an MBA from a decent university, drives a BMW 3 Series that my parents bought him, and has never once wondered where the money comes from. I was 24 when I first heard it. I'd come home late from work, still wearing my cheap Target blazer and shoes I'd bought on clearance. The house was dark except for a dim light in the living room. I moved quietly toward the kitchen, but I stopped when I heard my mother crying. "We're going to lose everything, Robert." My father's voice was strained, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "The bank gave us 6 months. If we can't come up with $680,000, they're taking the house." I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding. Through the doorway, I could see them sitting on the cognac-colored Restoration Hardware leather sofa, the one my mother bragged about at every dinner party. Above them, a Hermes wall clock ticked away the seconds, a family heirloom that felt obscenely out of place in a room full of people about to lose everything. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't know if I could save them, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't just sit there and watch my parents lose everything they'd built. The next morning, I called Uncle Marcus. Marcus Thornton is my father's younger brother, a retired real estate attorney who spent 30 years navigating property law before hanging up his briefcase. He's the black sheep of the family, according to my father, mostly because Marcus has a habit of telling the truth when people don't want to hear it. We met at a diner near his house. He ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing. "Tell me exactly what you heard," he said. So I did. The crying, the desperation, the 6-month deadline. Marcus set down his cup and studied me for a long moment. "Paige, do you understand what you're suggesting? That's $680,000. Even if you gave every penny of your salary for the next decade, you'd barely scratch the surface. I'll work overtime. I'll take side jobs. I'll cancel vacations, skip dinners out, live in a studio apartment if I have to." I leaned forward. "Uncle Marcus, I can do this. I just need time, and I need to do it the right way." He was quiet for a while. Then he pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "If you're serious about this, we need documentation. A trust deed and a promissory note. These establish you as the party paying off the mortgage, and if you pay it off completely, you become the beneficiary trustee of the property held in trust." What does that mean? It means your parents remain the settlers, they set up the trust. But you control the asset. They can't sell it, gift it, or transfer it without your signature. He looked at me hard. "I'll keep a copy in my safe, just in case." I nodded. "I'm not doing this for money, but I don't want my sacrifice to disappear either." 5 years. That's how long it took. 60 months, 1,825 days. I moved out of my decent apartment and into a studio that was 400 square feet of cracked linoleum and IKEA furniture. I assembled myself at midnight. My coworkers went to Cabo for spring break. I picked up extra shifts. They bought new cars. I drove a 2009 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles that made concerning noises every time I turned left. Every month, I transferred between $11,000 and $13,000 to the mortgage account. Some months I ate ramen for 2 weeks straight. Some months I worked 70 hours. Every single month I watched the balance go down and told myself, they'll understand when this is over. Meanwhile, Dylan's life looked different. My parents paid for his MBA, tuition, housing, everything. They bought him a BMW 3 Series when he got accepted. They funded his study abroad experience in Barcelona for a summer, and his networking trip to Aspen during winter break. I watched all of this from my studio apartment, eating leftovers on a folding table, telling myself it was fine because I was doing this for family. When the mortgage is paid off, I told myself, they'll see what I did. They'll understand. I never asked for recognition. I never demanded thanks. I just believed that family would eventually see my heart. Then, 3 weeks ago, I made my final payment. $11,847.63. I watched the transaction clear on my banking app, and then I received an email from the bank. Mortgage fully paid. Congratulations. I sat in my studio apartment, surrounded by secondhand furniture and 5 years of sacrifice, and I cried. Not from exhaustion, from relief. It was over. I thought the hard part was done. I was wrong. The first person I called was Uncle Marcus. It's done, I said, my voice cracking. I paid it off, every last cent. There was a pause on the other end, then quietly. I'm proud of you, Paige. I don't think you understand how rare what you just did is. What happens now? According to the trust deed, you're now the beneficiary trustee. Your parents are still the settlers. They set up the original arrangement, but they cannot sell, transfer, or gift the property without your written consent. That's not my opinion. That's the law. I exhaled slowly. I'm not trying to take anything from them. I want them to know what I did. I want them to see me. Then go home. Dylan's graduation party is next week. Talk to them privately. Explain everything. If they're the people you believe they are, they'll do the right thing. And if they're not? Marcus paused. The documents are still in my safe. If you ever need them, I'll bring them myself. 2 days later, I received a text from my mother. Dylan's graduation party is Saturday. Come early to help set up? You're always the most reliable one. Love, Mom. I stared at that message for a long time. You're always the most reliable one. For years, that sentence had felt like a compliment. Now, reading it again, I realized what it really meant. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who helped without asking for anything. I was the one who could be counted on to give and give and give. I didn't know it then, but that text would be the last time my mother ever called me reliable. 3 days before the party, I drove home for a family dinner. The moment I walked through the front door, something felt wrong. The dining room had been transformed. My mother had brought out the good china, the Wedgwood set with the cobalt blue trim that she only used for holidays and important announcements. Linen napkins, diptyque candles casting warm light across the mahogany table. Beef Wellington, a dish she hadn't made since Dylan got into graduate school. Dylan sat at the head of the table, grinning like a child on Christmas morning. My parents flanked him on either side, exchanging glances I couldn't read. Paige, there you are. My mother gestured toward the far end of the table. Sit, sit, we're just about to start. I moved toward my usual seat, the chair by the window, where I'd sat since I was 7 years old, and stopped. Dylan was in my chair. Oh, we shuffled things around, my mother said breezily. Dylan wanted the view tonight. You can sit at the end. The end of the table. The seat furthest from the conversation. The seat reserved for distant relatives and afterthoughts. I sat down without a word. My father poured wine from a bottle I recognized, a $400 Opus One that he'd been saving for something special. He raised his glass. Before we eat, I have an important announcement about the future of this family. My heart rate spiked. Maybe this was it. Maybe they were going to acknowledge what I'd done. Maybe 5 years of silence and sacrifice were finally about to pay off. My father smiled at Dylan, then at my mother. Then he spoke. And everything I believed about my family shattered in a single sentence. We've decided to give this house to Dylan as a graduation gift. The words hung in the air like smoke. My father's face was radiant, proud, certain, the face of a man who believed he was doing something noble. He reached over and clapped Dylan on the shoulder. This house has been in our family for 3 generations, and now it will be the foundation for Dylan's future. He's going to launch his startup right here, turn the basement into an office, use the equity to fund his first investors. This is the beginning of something great. Dylan beamed. I've already got the business plan ready, Dad. This is going to be huge. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her linen napkin. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. I sat frozen at the end of the table, my wine untouched, my food growing cold. They can't do this. The words screamed inside my head, but my mouth wouldn't move. They can't just give away a house I spent 5 years paying for. Finally, I found my voice. What about the mortgage? My father waved his hand dismissively. Taken care of. We don't owe a single penny anymore. I know it's taken care of. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling under the table. I'm the one who paid it off, $680,000, over 5 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Then my father laughed, not a confused laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh, a dismissive laugh, the kind you give a child who said something ridiculous. Paige, what are you talking about? You sent some money home to help with expenses. That was rent. We never asked you to pay off the mortgage. My mother nodded quickly. Of course. Just like any child living with their family would contribute. I felt the blood drain from my face. Rent? My voice came out hollow. I haven't lived here in 5 years. I've been in a studio apartment, working double shifts, giving up everything. Paige. My mother's tone sharpened, a warning wrapped in sweetness. Let's not make this difficult. This is Dylan's moment. We can discuss finances another time. Another time? I stared at her in disbelief. You're giving away a house I saved from foreclosure, and you want to discuss it another time? My father set down his wineglass, hard. The crystal rang against the mahogany. Enough! His voice was cold now, the warmth from a moment ago completely gone. This is my house. It has been my house for 30 years. Whatever contributions you made were appreciated, but they don't change who owns this property. The deed is in my name. The decision is mine. He looked at me the way you look at an employee who's overstepped. You need to accept this with grace, Paige. This is what's best for the family. Dylan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, my seat, but said nothing. I turned to my mother, searching for any sign that she understood what was happening. She avoided my eyes, studying her wineglass like it held the secrets of the universe. Mom, you know what I did. You saw the statements. You know. Linda Thornton took a slow, deliberate sip of her Opus 1. Paige, she said quietly, let's not ruin dinner. You always find a way to make everything complicated. The word landed like a slap. Complicated. That's what I was to them. Not the daughter who saved their home, not the sister who sacrificed everything. Just a complication, an inconvenience, an afterthought. Dylan finally spoke. Hey, Paige. He turned toward me with that easy smile, the same one that had gotten him everything he'd ever wanted. You're happy for me, right? I mean, this is huge. I'm going to build something amazing here. I looked at my little brother, 24 years old, MBA from a school our parents paid for, driving a BMW they bought him, wearing a brand new Rolex Submariner on his wrist, a watch I recognized immediately because our father had once told me he was saving it for the grandchildren. Dylan didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. In his mind, everything he had came from our parents' hard work. The house they were about to give him, a family legacy, the money that had kept them afloat for 5 years, his father's careful financial management. He had no idea that his sister had eaten ramen for weeks at a time so he could study abroad in Barcelona. Dylan, I said slowly, do you know who paid off the mortgage on this house? He blinked. Dad, obviously. He's been making payments for years. No, I shook my head. He hasn't. Not for the last 5 years. I have. Dylan's smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean that when Mom and Dad were about to lose this house to foreclosure, I stepped in. Every month for 5 years, I transferred money, my money, to pay off $680,000 in debt. That's why there's no mortgage anymore. That's why they can afford to give you anything. Dylan looked at our father, then at our mother. They said nothing. His confusion slowly transformed into something else. Not understanding, not yet, but the first crack in the illusion he'd lived in his whole life. Wait, he said quietly. Is that true? No one answered. I took a breath, then another. Okay, I said, pushing back from the table. I understand. You've made your decision about the house. We can discuss the details later, but I'll be at Dylan's graduation party on Saturday, just like I promised. My father's expression hardened. He glanced at my mother. She gave him a small, tight nod, the kind of silent communication that comes from 30 years of marriage and shared secrets. Actually, my father said, about the party. My stomach dropped. We think it would be better if you didn't attend. The words hit me like a physical blow. Excuse me? Your attitude lately has been… He searched for the right word. Negative. We don't want any drama at Dylan's celebration. This is his day. We need to keep the focus on him. I stared at my father. This man I had sacrificed everything for. This man whose house I had saved. This man who was looking at me like I was a stranger he wanted to get rid of. You're uninviting me from my own brother's graduation party. We're not uninviting you. My mother's voice was soft, reasonable, the tone she used when she was delivering bad news and pretending it wasn't bad. We're just suggesting that maybe you need some time to process your feelings. When you're in a better headspace. My headspace is fine. Paige. She leaned forward, her smile patient and patronizing. You know how you get. You make things complicated, and this is supposed to be a happy day. I sat very still. 5 years of sacrifice, $680,000, and this was what I got in return, a seat at the end of the table and a door being closed in my face. Then the doorbell rang. My mother frowned. Who could that be? We're not expecting anyone. The door opened, and Uncle Marcus stepped into the foyer. He wore a casual blazer and carried a leather briefcase, the same one he'd had for 30 years, worn at the corners but still holding together. His eyes swept the dining room, took in the fancy dinner, the Wedgwood china, my parents' frozen expressions. Then he looked at me. I don't know how, but he knew. He could see it on my face. The betrayal, the disbelief, the 5 years of sacrifice that had just been dismissed as rent. Marcus? My father stood up, his voice sharp. What are you doing here? This is a private family dinner. I came to check on my niece. Marcus closed the door behind him and walked into the dining room. Seems like good timing. We're in the middle of an important discussion. My mother's smile was brittle. Maybe you could come back tomorrow? What discussion? Marcus looked around the table. The one where you're giving away a house that Paige spent 5 years paying for? The room went dead silent. My father's face flushed red. That's none of your business. Actually, Robert, it is. Marcus set his briefcase on an empty chair. I'm the one who helped Paige structure the legal documents 5 years ago. The trust deed, the promissory note, the arrangement that makes her the beneficiary trustee once the mortgage was paid off. My mother's hand flew to her chest. What are you talking about? I looked at Uncle Marcus. He looked back at me, calm, steady, waiting. This was the moment. Uncle Marcus? I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos exploding inside me. Do you want to tell them, or should I? My father stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. This is ridiculous. His voice boomed through the dining room. This is a family matter, Marcus. You have no right to interfere with decisions I make about my own property. Marcus didn't flinch. He calmly unclasped his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. That's the thing, Robert. It may not be entirely your property anymore. Of course it is. My name is on the deed. I've owned this house for 30 years. You owned it, yes. But 5 years ago, when you were 6 months away from foreclosure, you signed documents creating a trust arrangement. Do you remember that? My father's face went pale. My mother clutched her napkin like a lifeline. That was just paperwork. Legal formalities. It didn't mean anything. Every legal document means something. Marcus opened the folder. You and Linda are the settlers. You established the trust. But the terms clearly state that whoever pays off the mortgage in full becomes the beneficiary trustee. That person gains controlling interest in the property held in trust. Dylan looked back and forth between them, completely lost. Wait, what's a beneficiary trustee? It means, Marcus said slowly, that your sister now has legal authority over this property. Your parents cannot sell it, transfer it, or gift it to anyone without her written consent. My mother burst into tears. This can't be happening. We didn't know. We never agreed to this. You did agree to it. You signed the documents. I witnessed your signatures myself. Marcus turned to me. Paige, do you have anything you want to say? I looked at my parents, their shocked faces, their desperate eyes. I don't want to fight, I said quietly. I just want the truth to be acknowledged. Marcus laid the documents on the table, the trust deed, the promissory note, and a stack of bank statements. These show every transfer Paige made over the past 5 years, 60 payments, totaling $680,000. Every single one came from her personal checking account. My father grabbed the bank statements, his hands trembling as he flipped through them. This doesn't prove anything. Anyone could have. Helen Thompson verified all of this. The room fell silent. Helen Thompson had been our family's accountant for 20 years. She handled the taxes, reviewed the financial statements, kept meticulous records of every transaction. If anyone knew where the money came from, it was her. I spoke with her yesterday, Marcus continued. She confirmed that every payment in the last 5 years originated from an account registered to Paige Elizabeth Thornton. She has copies of the wire transfers, the account holder verification, and her own contemporaneous notes. She's prepared to confirm this in writing if needed. My father's face had gone from red to ash gray. My mother was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. You, my father turned to me, his voice shaking. You did this behind our backs. You went around us, set up secret agreements, conspired with my own brother. I met his gaze steadily. No, Dad. I didn't go behind your back. I saved your house when you were about to lose it. I gave up 5 years of my life, vacations, savings, relationships, so you wouldn't end up on the street. And I documented it because I wanted there to be a record of what I did, not to use against you. My voice cracked slightly. Just so someone would know. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You should have told us. You never asked. My father slammed his palm on the table. The Wedgwood plates rattled. This is betrayal, his voice cracked with fury. You exploited our vulnerability to steal our home. I didn't steal anything. I saved it. By manipulating us! By setting up legal traps while we were drowning! He pointed at Marcus, his fingers shaking. And you! You helped her do this. My own brother, working against me. Marcus didn't raise his voice. Robert, I helped your daughter protect herself after she agreed to pay off your $680,000 debt. If that feels like betrayal to you, maybe you should ask yourself why. My mother sobbed into her napkin. How could you do this to us, Paige? After everything we've done for you, we raised you, we fed you, we gave you everything. I stared at her. Everything? They'd paid for Dylan's MBA while I worked 2 jobs to get through a state school. They'd bought him a BMW while I drove a 15-year-old Civic. They'd sent him to Barcelona while I ate ramen in a studio apartment. But I didn't say any of that. What was the point? Mom, I said quietly, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying to make sure that what I did isn't erased, that I'm not forgotten. Forgotten? She looked at me with genuine confusion. We've never forgotten you. You just uninvited me from my own brother's graduation party. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at my father for support. He was still glaring at Marcus, his chest heaving. Dylan sat frozen, his expensive watch gleaming under the chandelier, his untouched beef Wellington growing cold. For the first time in his life, the golden child had nothing to say. And neither did I. I stood up slowly, pushing back my chair. I'm not here to argue, I said. I came tonight hoping we could talk about this privately. I wanted to explain what I did and why and figure out a path forward together. My father laughed bitterly. A path forward? You've just announced that you own my house. I haven't announced anything. Uncle Marcus explained the legal situation, which is real whether you like it or not. But I'm not trying to take anything from you. I turned to Dylan. Dylan, I'm not angry at you. You didn't know any of this. None of this is your fault. His eyes were wide, uncertain, the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just shifted beneath his feet. Then I faced my parents. If you want to uninvite me from the party, fine, but I will be there on Saturday, not to make a scene, not to embarrass anyone. I picked up my purse from the floor. I'll be there to make sure the truth is spoken, whether you want to tell it yourselves or whether someone else has to. My mother gasped. Are you threatening us? No, Mom, I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. I walked toward the door. Marcus closed his briefcase and followed. At the threshold, I paused and looked back at my family. My father rigid with fury, my mother dissolving into tears, my brother sitting shell-shocked in my chair. 3 days, I said. You have 3 days to figure out how you want to handle this. Either you acknowledge what I did or the paperwork speaks for itself. I stepped into the night air, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't need them to love me. I just needed them to stop pretending I didn't exist. I'm going to pause here for just a moment. If you've ever been overlooked by your own family, if you've ever sacrificed everything only to be treated like you're invisible, drop A in the comments. I want to know you're here with me. And if this story is making you feel something, hit that like button. Not for me, for yourself. Now, let's keep going. I drove back to my studio apartment in the dark. The streetlights blurred past my windshield, and for a long time, I didn't think about anything at all. My body went through the motions, steering, braking, signaling, while my mind floated somewhere above it all, numb and disconnected. When I finally pulled into my parking spot and climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my door, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by 400 square feet of cheap furniture and secondhand curtains, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. $680,000. 5 years. And they called it rent. I thought about all the Christmases I'd spent alone because I couldn't afford to travel home, all the birthdays I'd celebrated with a cupcake from the grocery store, all the times I'd watched Dylan's Instagram stories, Barcelona, Aspen, graduation parties, and told myself it was fine because I was doing something that mattered. For the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. Did they ever love me? Or was I always just useful? A sob clawed its way up my throat. I pressed my hands over my mouth, trying to hold it in, but it came anyway, ugly, ragged, the kind of crying you only do when no one else can hear. On my small desk, illuminated by the glow of streetlights through the thin curtains, sat a stack of bank statements. 5 years of transfers, 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of believing that family would eventually see what I'd done. They saw. They just didn't care. I cried until I had nothing left. Then I wiped my face, took a breath, and picked up my phone. I still had work to do. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Aunt Ruth. Paige, I am very disappointed in you. Your mother called me in tears. How could you treat your parents this way? Cousin Michael. Heard you're trying to steal Uncle Robert's house? That's messed up, Paige. My mother's best friend, Donna. Linda told me what happened. I've known you since you were a baby. I never thought you'd be capable of something like this. I scrolled through message after message, each one delivering the same verdict. Selfish, ungrateful, troublemaker. My mother had worked fast. In less than 12 hours, she'd called everyone in her contact list and delivered her version of the story. Paige was trying to steal the family home. Paige was jealous of Dylan. Paige was making things complicated because she couldn't accept that her brother was more successful. Not a single person had asked for my side. Not one. I was halfway through composing a response to Aunt Ruth when a new message popped up, from a number I didn't recognize. This is Helen Thompson. I heard what happened from Marcus. I've worked for your family for 20 years, and I know what the truth is. Call me when you're ready. Helen Thompson, our family accountant, the woman who'd processed every single payment I'd ever made. I stared at the message for a long time. If Helen was reaching out, it meant she was willing to verify what I'd done, independently, without any connection to Uncle Marcus. A second witness. A second source of proof. I saved her number and put down my phone. The assault from my extended family hurt. There was no denying that. But I wasn't going to respond. Not yet. When I spoke, it would be with evidence, and everyone would hear. I called Helen Thompson that evening. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but serious. Paige, I'm glad you reached out. Mrs. Thompson, I wasn't sure if you'd want to get involved. I've been your family's accountant for 20 years, sweetheart. I've seen every transaction, every statement, every check that's ever crossed their books. And I've seen what you did. She paused. I think it's time someone acknowledged it. What do you mean? I mean that your father asked me about those payments last year. My breath caught. What? He called me, said he'd noticed unusual deposits into the mortgage account, asked where the money was coming from. I told him the truth, that every payment was traced back to an account in your name. I felt the room spin slightly. He knew? He knew last year? He knew. I have the email I sent him confirming it, dated March of last year. He replied with a single word. Understood. And then he never mentioned it again. I closed my eyes. All this time, I thought my parents were simply unaware, that they'd been too proud or too distracted to notice what I was doing for them. But my father had known. He'd asked. He'd received confirmation, and he'd chosen to pretend he didn't. Mrs. Thompson, I said slowly, if I needed you to verify these payments, publicly, would you be willing? I have 5 years of records, wire transfer confirmations, and my own contemporaneous notes from every quarterly review. If you need a witness, I'm ready. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in the dark of my studio apartment, processing what I'd just learned. My father hadn't forgotten my sacrifice. He'd buried it. And that was so much worse. I called Uncle Marcus the next morning. I spoke with Helen Thompson, I said. She's willing to verify everything. I know. She called me right after. There was a smile in his voice. You've got 2 independent sources now, Paige. Your father can spin whatever story he wants to the extended family, but he can't argue with bank records and a 20-year accountant. So what do we do? That depends. What do you want to happen at the party? I thought about it carefully. I don't want to humiliate anyone, I said. I don't want to ruin Dylan's graduation, but I'm not going to let them stand up in front of 50 people and give away a house I paid for while pretending I don't exist. Fair enough. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Here's what I suggest. We give them one more chance. If your parents want to tell the truth themselves, acknowledge what you did, adjust their announcement, then we stay silent. But if they proceed with the original plan, then you speak up. Then I present the facts, calmly, professionally, with Helen there as verification, no accusations, no drama, just the truth. And if they try to shut you down, they can try, but there will be 50 witnesses in that backyard. Half of them have already heard your mother's version of events. They deserve to hear the real story. I took a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. That evening, I laid out my clothes for Saturday. A navy blazer, a white silk blouse, simple pearl earrings. I wasn't dressing for a party. I was dressing for a reckoning. In 3 days, everything would change. I just didn't know how much. Saturday arrived, bright and warm. I parked my old Civic a block away from my parents' house and sat in the driver's seat for a full 5 minutes, steadying my breathing. When I finally walked around the corner, I saw what my mother had created. The front lawn had been transformed into something out of a lifestyle magazine. White linen tablecloths draped elegant farm tables. Strings of fairy lights wove through the oak tree branches, waiting for dusk. A catering team in black aprons set up silver chafing dishes on a long buffet table, and imported flowers. Peonies, ranunculus, roses in pale pinks and creams, spilled from crystal vases at every turn. At least 50 guests milled about the yard, holding champagne flutes and chatting in clusters. Neighbors, extended family, friends from my parents' country club, Dylan's business school professors, and at the center of it all stood my parents. Robert Thornton wore a cream linen suit, every inch the gracious host. Linda floated among the guests in a floral dress, her smile bright and practiced. They looked like the perfect couple celebrating their perfect son's perfect achievement. No one would ever guess they were about to give away a house that wasn't entirely theirs to give. I spotted Grandma Eleanor in the corner, seated in her wheelchair with a blanket over her knees. At 82, she rarely spoke anymore, but her eyes were sharp, watching everything. When she saw me, she gave a small nod. I nodded back. Across the yard, I caught sight of Uncle Marcus near the hedge, Helen Thompson beside him. They were dressed conservatively, blending into the crowd. Marcus met my eyes and gave an almost imperceptible signal. We were ready. Now it was just a matter of waiting for my parents to make their choice. An hour into the party, my father tapped a silver spoon against his champagne flute. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" The crowd quieted, turning toward the small platform that had been set up near the oak tree. My father stood at the center, my mother beside him, Dylan grinning on his other side. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate our wonderful son's MBA graduation." My father's voice carried across the lawn, warm and confident. "Dylan has worked so hard to get to this moment, and we couldn't be prouder." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. "But today isn't just about the degree." My father paused dramatically. "Today we're announcing something even bigger." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, thick, cream-colored, tied with a ribbon. "This house has been in the Thornton family for 3 generations, and today we're officially passing it on to the next." He handed the envelope to Dylan. "Son, this property is now yours, your foundation, your future, your legacy." Dylan opened the envelope and pulled out a decorative certificate. Not an actual deed, I noticed, just a symbolic gesture. But the crowd didn't know that. They erupted into applause, phone cameras flashing. "Speech, speech," someone called. Dylan stepped forward, clutching the certificate, his Rolex catching the afternoon sun. "I don't know what to say," he began, his voice slightly choked. This is incredible. I promise I'll make this family proud. This house is where I'll build my empire. I looked at Uncle Marcus. He looked at Helen Thompson. Then he looked at me and raised his eyebrows. Now? I took a breath, stepped forward and called out, "Actually, before we continue, I think there's something important everyone should know." 50 heads turned toward me. My father's smile froze. My mother's champagne flute stopped halfway to her lips. "Paige." My father's voice was tight, controlled. "We talked about this. This isn't the time." "Actually, Dad, I think this is exactly the time." I walked slowly toward the platform, my heels clicking on the flagstone path. "You're standing in front of everyone we know, giving away a house. I think they deserve to know the full story." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aunt Ruth whispered something to Cousin Michael. A few of Dylan's professors exchanged confused glances. My mother stepped forward, her smile strained. "Paige, sweetheart, let's talk about this privately. We had the chance to talk privately 3 days ago. You told me I wasn't welcome at this party because my attitude was too negative." I kept my voice calm, even. "But I'm here anyway, because I earned the right to be here." My father's face was turning red. "If you're going to make a scene—" "I'm not making a scene. I'm telling the truth." I turned to face the crowd. "Most of you have known my family for years. You've watched me and Dylan grow up. You probably think you know everything about us." I paused, letting the silence build. "But you don't know that 5 years ago, this house was 6 months from foreclosure. And you don't know that I spent the last 5 years of my life paying off the entire $680,000 mortgage, alone, without asking for anything in return." Gasps. Whispers. Mrs. Wilson from next door clutched her pearls. I turned to Uncle Marcus. "Would you like to explain the rest? Or should I?" Marcus stepped forward, his briefcase in hand. "I think I'd better show everyone the paperwork." Uncle Marcus walked to the front of the crowd with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent 30 years in courtrooms. "Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Marcus Thornton, Robert's younger brother and a retired real estate attorney." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to present facts." My father lunged forward. "Marcus, I swear to God." "Robert, please, let me finish." Marcus didn't raise his voice, but his tone brooked no argument. 5 years ago, my brother was in serious financial trouble. The bank was preparing to foreclose on this house. If nothing had changed, you would all be standing in someone else's yard right now. The crowd was dead silent. Paige came to me and offered to pay off the remaining mortgage herself. All $680,000 of it. In exchange for documentation, a trust deed and promissory note that would protect her investment. These documents clearly state that upon full payment of the mortgage, Paige becomes the beneficiary trustee of the property. He held up the papers for everyone to see. "What does that mean in plain English? It means that Robert and Linda cannot sell, transfer, or gift this property without Paige's written consent. The announcement you just witnessed, legally meaningless. Dylan doesn't own this house. He never did." My father's face was purple. "Those documents are fraudulent. He forged my signature." Helen Thompson stepped forward, her gray hair catching the sunlight. "I can verify that they're not," she said calmly. "I've been the Thornton family accountant for 20 years. I processed every payment Paige made, 60 transfers, totaling $680,000. I have bank records, wire confirmations, and my own notes. It's all legitimate." The crowd erupted. Voices exploded across the lawn. "Did you know about this?" "I had no idea." "She paid the whole thing herself? Why didn't they ever say anything?" Helen Thompson stood beside Uncle Marcus, her presence calm and unshakable. "For the record," she continued, raising her voice over the noise, "Robert asked me about these payments last March. I sent him an email confirming that all deposits originated from Paige's personal account. He acknowledged receipt." All eyes turned to my father. His face was ashen. That's out of context. I didn't understand what I was reading." "You replied with the word understood," Helen said evenly. I have the email. Mrs. Wilson, our neighbor of 15 years, stepped forward. Her husband had golfed with my father every Sunday morning for a decade. Robert, she said slowly, are you telling me that all those times you bragged about paying off your mortgage early, about being debt-free, that was actually your daughter's money? My father couldn't meet her eyes. Aunt Ruth, who had sent me that furious text message about stealing my parents' home, stood frozen, her face pale. Linda called me yesterday, she said quietly. She told me Paige was trying to take everything from them, that Paige was jealous of Dylan, that... She trailed off, looking at me. That wasn't true, was it? No, I said. It wasn't. The crowd shifted, murmuring. People who had looked at my parents with admiration moments ago now stared at them with something else entirely. Doubt, disappointment, the beginning of understanding. My mother was crying again, but this time no one moved to comfort her. And Dylan, poor Dylan, stood clutching his worthless certificate, looking like a man who had just watched his entire foundation crumble. Dylan stepped down from the platform, his legs unsteady. Wait, his voice was barely audible. Paige, you paid off the mortgage? The whole thing? I turned to face him. My little brother, still holding that decorative certificate like it meant something. Yes, Dylan, every month for 5 years. While you were studying abroad and buying BMWs and planning your startup, I was working double shifts and living in a studio apartment, sending every spare dollar to the bank so Mom and Dad wouldn't lose their home. He stared at me, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like horror. I didn't know, he whispered. Nobody told me. I thought Dad handled all of it. I thought the house was just ours. I know you didn't know. I softened my voice. That's not your fault, Dylan. You weren't told because they didn't want you to be told. He turned to our parents, the certificate crumpling slightly in his grip. Is this true? You knew Paige was paying for everything, and you never said anything? You let me think I was the one you were proud of, while she... He couldn't finish the sentence. My mother reached for him. Dylan, sweetheart, we were protecting you. He stepped back away from her touch. Protecting me from what? From knowing my sister sacrificed everything while you treated her like she didn't matter? For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dylan did something I never expected. He looked at me, his eyes glistening. I'm sorry, Paige. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I nodded slowly. I know you didn't. I don't want this. He held up the certificate. I don't want a house that was given to me by pretending you don't exist. He let it fall to the ground. My father exploded. This is absurd! He stepped forward, addressing the crowd with the desperation of a man watching his kingdom crumble. You're all being manipulated. This is a family matter, private business, and my brother has turned it into a public spectacle to humiliate me. He pointed at Uncle Marcus with a shaking finger. You've always been jealous of me, haven't you? Always resented that I was the successful one, the one with the family, the one who made something of himself. Robert, Marcus's voice was calm. This isn't about me. This is about the daughter you tried to erase. I didn't erase anyone. You took her money, denied her contribution, uninvited her from her own brother's party, and were about to give away a house she legally controls without ever acknowledging a single thing she did for you. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence. No one was reaching for champagne anymore. Mrs. Wilson's husband cleared his throat. Robert, I've known you for 15 years. We've golfed together every Sunday. You told me you were financially responsible, that you managed your money the old-fashioned way. Was any of that true? My father couldn't answer. My mother had collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. You don't understand, she wept. We did everything for our children. Everything. We just wanted what was best. For Dylan, I said quietly. You wanted what was best for Dylan. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Paige. It's okay, Mom. I understand now. I took a breath. I understand that in this family, I was never meant to be seen. I was just supposed to give quietly and disappear. I looked at my father, my mother, my brother. But I'm not disappearing anymore. A soft voice cut through the tension. May I say something? Everyone turned. Grandma Eleanor was being wheeled forward by her nurse, her thin hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. At 82, she rarely spoke anymore, but when she did, people listened. I've been watching, she said, her voice frail but clear. I've been watching for a long time. She looked at my father, her son. Robert, I receive emails from the bank. I'm still listed as a co-owner from when your father and I first bought this house in 1972. I've seen every statement. I know whose name was on those payments. My father went very still. I kept quiet, Grandma Eleanor continued, because I believed you would eventually do the right thing. I believed you would acknowledge your daughter. I believed, her voice wavered slightly, that I had raised a better man than this. The silence that followed was devastating. Then she turned to me, her eyes softening. Paige, come here. I walked to her slowly, kneeling beside her wheelchair. I've wanted to tell you something for a long time, she said, but I was waiting for your father to be the man he should have been. She reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, and I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. Tears spilled down my cheeks. In this family, Grandma Eleanor said, loud enough for everyone to hear, no one should ever be invisible because they're a daughter instead of a son. Paige saved this house. Paige deserves to be honored, and if her own parents won't say it, she looked at Robert with something close to contempt, then I will. The crowd shifted, and something in the air changed. I stood slowly, my grandmother's hand still holding mine. The crowd waited. My parents waited. Dylan waited. For a long moment, I said nothing at all. Then I spoke. I didn't come here to take anything. My voice was steady, calmer than I expected. I didn't come here to humiliate my parents or ruin my brother's day. I came here because I spent 5 years being invisible, and I finally decided that I deserved to exist. I looked at my father, then my mother. You can continue living in this house. I'm not going to throw you out or sell it from under you, but from now on, any major decisions about this property require my consent. That's not revenge. That's just the law. The same law that existed when I signed those documents 5 years ago. I turned to Dylan. I don't hate you. I never have. But I need you to understand that my sacrifice wasn't rent. It wasn't helping out. It was everything I had for 5 years so that you could have the life you have now. Dylan nodded slowly, his eyes red. Finally, I faced my parents one last time. I am still your daughter. That will never change. But from this moment forward, respect is not optional. It's not a gift you give when you feel like it. It's a requirement. I picked up my purse from where I'd set it on a nearby table. I love you. Despite everything, I love you. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. I walked toward the gate, past the silent crowd, past the fairy lights and the imported flowers and the champagne that no one was drinking anymore. At the threshold, I paused. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of the party. Then I walked away. I'm going to step out of the story for just a second. If you're still watching, ask yourself, is there someone in your life who gave everything and never got recognized? Maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone you know. If this story is resonating, hit that like button. And stay with me, because what happened after that party changed everything. Now, back to my story. The party dissolved within the hour. I watched from my car, parked a block away as guests trickled out, conversations hushed, expressions troubled. Mrs. Wilson paused at the gate to say something to her husband. He shook his head slowly. Aunt Ruth walked out without looking back, her earlier certainty replaced by something closer to shame. Before driving away, I saw a few people approach me. Mrs. Wilson knocked on my window. I rolled it down. "Paige." Her voice was gentle. "I've lived next door to your family for 15 years. I always thought they were. Well, I thought I knew them." She paused. "I had no idea. I'm sorry I assumed the worst about you." "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Your grandmother was right." She reached through the window and squeezed my hand. "You deserved better." A few others stopped by, people I barely knew, friends of friends, all expressing variations of the same sentiment. "We didn't know. We're sorry. You should be proud of yourself." By the time I finally drove away, the backyard was nearly empty. The fairy lights were still twinkling. The champagne bottles sat untouched on the buffet table. The decorative certificate lay crumpled on the grass where Dylan had dropped it. My parents stood alone on the platform, surrounded by the wreckage of a celebration that had turned into something else entirely. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel proud, exactly. And I definitely didn't feel happy. But I felt real, seen, acknowledged. When I got home that night, I sat in my studio apartment, the same 400 square feet where I'd eaten ramen and worked overtime and quietly saved a house that was never supposed to be mine. And I slept better than I had in years. Dylan called me a week later. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, maybe the part that had always loved my little brother despite everything, made me pick up. "Hey." His voice was different, quieter, less certain. "Hey, can we meet? I need to talk to you, in person." We met at a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and our parents' house. Dylan was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth staring at his untouched latte. He looked up when I sat down. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about everything, about the last 24 years, about all the things I just accepted as normal." I waited. Mom and Dad paid for my tuition, bought me a car, funded my trips, and the whole time I thought it was because they were successful. He laughed bitterly. "I thought they were good with money. I had no idea it was because you were bleeding yourself dry to keep them afloat." "You didn't know, Dylan. But I should have asked. I should have noticed something. You were living in a studio apartment while I was flying to Barcelona. How did I not see it?" "Because you weren't supposed to see it. They made sure of that." He was quiet for a long moment. "They're not talking to each other," he said finally. "Dad's been sleeping in the living room. Mom cries all the time. They're furious. At each other, at Uncle Marcus, at everyone except themselves." "Are they angry at you?" "They keep saying I should fix things, make peace, convince you to let everything go back to the way it was." He met my eyes. "I told them no." "You did?" "I told them the only person who needs to make things right is them." The weeks after the party were difficult for my parents. Word had spread through their community faster than they could contain it. The country club members who used to admire them now whispered behind their backs. My father's Sunday golf group, the men he'd bragged to for years about his financial discipline, quietly stopped inviting him. My mother's book club held meetings without mentioning them. The image of the perfect Thornton family had cracked, and everyone could see what was underneath. I heard bits and pieces from Uncle Marcus, who kept me updated. "Your father is struggling," he told me over the phone. "He's used to being respected, admired. Now he walks into a room and people look at him differently. It's hitting him hard." "And Mom?" "Same. She built her entire identity around being the matriarch of a successful family, the woman whose son was going places, whose husband provided well, whose home was a showpiece. Now people know the truth, that a daughter they ignored was the one holding it all together." I didn't feel satisfied by their suffering. I didn't feel vindicated. If anything, I felt tired. "What happens now?" I asked. "That's up to them. They can either acknowledge what they did and try to rebuild, or they can keep blaming everyone else. But the legal situation is clear. You're the beneficiary trustee. Nothing changes unless you sign off on it." I thought about Dylan, still processing everything. About Grandma Eleanor, who had finally spoken the truth after years of watching in silence. And I thought about my parents, two people who had spent decades building an image only to have it shatter in a single afternoon. At night, my father's words echoed in my mind. We did everything for our children. No, I thought. You did everything for one of them. A month after the party, I met with Uncle Marcus to discuss the future. We sat in his study, a quiet room lined with law books and framed photographs, and he laid out my options. You have full control now, he said. You could sell the property and take the proceeds. You could evict your parents and rent it out. You could... I'm not doing any of that. He nodded slowly. I didn't think you would. They can stay, rent-free. But I want a formal meeting, a family meeting, where we establish new rules. No more decisions about this house without my involvement. No more pretending I don't have a say. That's more than fair. And Marcus? I leaned forward. What about Grandma Eleanor? Is she okay? He smiled slightly. Actually, she called me last week. She's made some changes to her estate plan. What kind of changes? She has a separate trust. Assets that have nothing to do with your father. Some savings, a small property upstate that your grandfather bought decades ago. She's updated her will to leave a significant portion of it to you. I stared at him. She didn't have to do that. She wanted to. She said, he chuckled. She said it was long overdue. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All those years, I thought I was alone. I thought no one in my family saw what I was doing or cared. But Grandma Eleanor had been watching the whole time. She'd seen me when my own parents refused to. Thank her for me, I said quietly. Tell her I love her. You can tell her yourself. She's expecting your call. I left Marcus's house that evening feeling lighter than I had in years. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. 6 weeks after the party, the family meeting finally happened. We gathered in the living room, the same room where I'd first overheard my parents' desperation, the same cognac leather sofa, the same Hermes clock ticking on the wall, but everything felt different now. My father sat stiffly in an armchair, his face drawn. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dylan sat apart from them, closer to me than I expected. Uncle Marcus acted as mediator. We're here to establish a path forward, he said. Paige has made it clear that she's not seeking to remove Robert and Linda from the home, but there need to be new understandings in place. My father cleared his throat. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly, painfully, Paige, I owe you an apology. I waited. I was wrong about a lot of things. He still wouldn't look at me directly. I didn't handle this well. I should have acknowledged what you did. I should have... His voice cracked slightly. I should have been a better father. It wasn't a perfect apology. There was still defensiveness underneath it, still the hint of a man who didn't fully understand what he'd done wrong. But it was something. My mother spoke next, her voice trembling. I love you, Paige. I always have. I didn't know how to show it the right way. I know, Mom. Can you forgive us? I thought about everything. The 5 years, the $680,000, the seat at the end of the table, the words, you make things complicated. And I gave them the only honest answer I had. I need time. Forgiveness doesn't happen all at once. But I'm willing to try. Dylan reached over and squeezed my hand. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. I'd moved out of the studio apartment, finally, into a 2-bedroom place with actual closet space and windows that faced the sunrise. I bought furniture that I chose myself. A soft gray couch, bookshelves I spent a whole weekend assembling, a real dining table where I could eat dinner like a human being instead of hunched over a folding tray. My job had improved too. The overtime I'd been working for years had caught someone's attention, and I'd been promoted to senior accountant with a raise that still felt surreal. For the first time in my adult life, I had money in savings that wasn't earmarked for someone else. Things with Dylan got better. We started meeting for lunch once a month, then every 2 weeks. He was different now, less certain, more thoughtful. His startup plans had been put on hold while he re-evaluated what success really meant. I didn't know if he'd ever fully understand what the last 5 years had cost me, but he was trying. That counted for something. My parents were harder. We spoke occasionally, carefully. The relationship was nothing like it had been before, but maybe that was okay. The old relationship had been built on me giving everything and expecting nothing. This new one, whatever it became, would at least be honest. Grandma Eleanor and I talked every Sunday morning now. She told me stories about my grandfather, about the early years of the house, about a time when the Thornton family had been different. "You remind me of him," she said once. "Quiet, steady, stronger than anyone realizes." I didn't cry often anymore, but that made me cry. Some wounds don't heal completely, but they do heal. I was living proof of that. If you're still listening, let me leave you with this. I didn't tell this story because I wanted revenge. I didn't share it because I needed the world to know how badly I was treated. I told it because somewhere out there, someone else is living the same story right now. Maybe you're the child who always gives, who always sacrifices, who always shows up, and never gets seen. Maybe you're exhausted from carrying a family that doesn't carry you back. If that's you, I want you to know something. You deserve to exist. You deserve to take up space, to be acknowledged, to have your sacrifices mean something. You don't have to scream or fight or tear everything down, but you do have to decide that you matter, even if nobody else does. Document what you do. Build relationships with people who see you clearly. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to speak the truth. I spent 5 years believing that family would eventually recognize my sacrifice, that love would be enough, that if I just gave a little more, tried a little harder, stayed a little quieter, they'd finally see me. They didn't. And that's not my failure. That's theirs. But the moment I stopped waiting for permission to exist, the moment I decided that I was worthy of being seen whether they agreed or not, everything changed. My name is Paige Thornton. I'm 29 years old. I paid off a $680,000 mortgage for a family that called it rent. And I don't regret a single dollar. Because in the end, that money didn't just save a house, it saved me. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If Paige's story touched something in you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. And if you want more, check out the video I've linked in the description. It's another story I think you'll connect with. See you next time.